Daddy. She's here again. Today makes 3 days. Lily Marconi pressed her small body against the rough bark of the old oak tree at the corner of the playground, her voice barely louder than a breath. From where she stood, half hidden behind the wide trunk, she could see the iron fence that bordered St. Augustine's Academy in Manhattan and the stretch of sidewalk just beyond it. On the other end of the line, Dante Marconi went still. When he spoke, his voice had shifted in a way only Lily knew how to read. Are you sure it's the same woman? Same rabbit? Yes, Daddy. Same gray coat. Same scarf. She's holding the white rabbit again. Lily peeked around the trunk. The woman stood beyond the iron bars, exactly as she had the past 2 mornings. The plush rabbit pressed against her chest had grayed with time, one ear bent permanently from being held the same way too many nights. What is she doing right now? She isn't smiling. She isn't waving. She's just looking at me. In the conference room on the 42nd floor of Marconi Holdings, Dante rose slowly from the head of a long mahogany table. 6 capos sat around it, mid-sentence about a contested shipment at the Brooklyn docks. Every one of them stopped talking. Marco Romano was already on his feet, hand at his earpiece, moving toward the door. Listen to me carefully, Lily. Stay behind that tree. Do not walk toward the fence. Marco will be there in 8 minutes. I'm right behind him. Okay, Daddy. Are you frightened? Lily considered the question seriously, the way she always did. A little, but she doesn't look mean. She looks like she wants to cry. Something unreadable crossed Dante's face. Before he could answer, Lily heard footsteps on the bark mulch behind her. Lily, sweetheart, why are you standing all the way over here? Mrs. Whitfield, her homeroom teacher, had appeared at the edge of the playground, concern written plainly across her face. Lily looked up. I'm talking to my daddy. He wants to talk to you. The teacher took the phone with mild surprise. Hello? This is Margaret Whitfield. Mrs. Whitfield. This is Dante Marconi. The teacher straightened immediately. People always did, when they heard that name spoken in that tone. My daughter tells me a woman has been watching her for 3 consecutive mornings. Can you confirm whether someone is there now? Mrs. Whitfield turned, following Lily's line of sight past the oak tree, through the iron bars. Her face changed. Oh, she said softly. Yes, Mr. Marconi. There is a woman there, in a gray coat, holding a stuffed rabbit. Have you seen her before today? There was a pause, the kind that always preceded a confession. I noticed her 2 days ago. I assumed she was a relative connected to your household. She never approached the gate, so Dante did not raise his voice. He never needed to. A stranger has watched my daughter for 3 days, and no one thought to inform me. I am so sorry, sir. Bring Lily inside. Stay with her until Marco Romano arrives. He will identify himself. No one else comes near my daughter until I arrive. Yes, Mr. Marconi. The teacher knelt and handed the phone back, her hand trembling slightly now. Come along, darling. Let's go inside. But before Lily stepped away from the oak tree, she turned and looked one last time through the iron bars. The woman had not moved. The rabbit was still held tight against her chest, both arms wrapped around it, as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. And from across the distance, through the cool spring air and the morning light slanting between the bars, Lily saw something she had not seen on either of the previous 2 mornings. The woman was crying, silent tears, sliding down her face without sound, without movement, as if she had long ago stopped believing anyone would notice them. Lily's small hand tightened around the phone. Something inside her chest pulled toward the woman before she could stop it. Mrs. Whitfield's hand settled gently between her shoulder blades, guiding her toward the side entrance. Lily allowed herself to be led away, but the image of the crying woman stayed with her, pressed into her memory like a thumbprint on warm clay. Dante ended the call and slipped the phone into his jacket. The conference room had gone silent. 6 capos waited without moving. We're done here, Dante said. Vincent Castellano, the oldest, half rose. Boss, the Brooklyn shipment will wait. No one argued. Marco Romano was already at the door, speaking low into his earpiece, dispatching 2 cars and a perimeter team to St. Augustine's before Dante had crossed the room. Marconi Holdings occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower on 5th Avenue, the kind of legitimate facade that made tax attorneys sleep peacefully and federal investigators grind their teeth. Imported leather, marble inlays, an original Rothko behind the receptionist. Everything chosen to suggest a man who built things rather than buried them. The private elevator descended in silence. In the underground garage, the black armored Escalade was already running. Marco took the seat opposite him, tablet in hand. 2 cars at the school, 3 men sweeping the perimeter. Sister Margaret's been notified. The gates are being sealed. And the woman? Still at the fence 90 seconds ago. She hasn't moved. The Escalade pulled into traffic. Marco glanced once at his boss, then said what he'd been holding behind his teeth. Boss, this could be a setup. Bianchi's been quiet for 3 weeks. Too quiet. Dante did not look away from the window. A woman with a worn-out stuffed rabbit? That isn't Bianchi's style. He sends bullets, not symbols. Stranger things have happened. Yes, they have. For a moment, his mind drifted to the last war. 18 months of bloodshed over the West Side corridor. 2 of his men dead in a parking lot off 10th Avenue. A Bianchi nephew floating in the East River, though no one had ever connected that to him in any room that mattered. The peace they had now was not peace. It was breath being held. But this woman did not fit any shape Salvatore Bianchi had ever cut. He pulled out his phone. Sister Margaret, this is Dante Marconi. Mr. Marconi, your security team is here. We've moved Lily into my office. Lock the front gate. No one in or out until I arrive. No parents. No deliveries. Are we clear? Yes, Mr. Marconi. He ended the call and looked back out the window. There were exactly 2 people in this world who had ever softened anything in him. One was buried in a hillside cemetery in Sleepy Hollow, with the name Elena Marconi carved into white marble. The other was Lily. After Elena had died, there had been almost a full year when Dante had walked through his life like a man already in the grave. Then, in the middle of one rainy night, a stranger had placed a 1-year-old child in his arms. He had not chosen Lily. Lily had been chosen for him. The Escalade turned onto Park Avenue and slowed as the brick facade of St. Augustine's came into view. 2 black SUVs were already at the curb. Dante stepped out before the driver could come around. He did not hurry. He had learned long ago that hurrying made men look small. The morning light caught the dark fabric of his Brioni suit, and every face on the sidewalk turned away as quickly as it had turned toward him. Sister Margaret waited in the doorway, hands folded against the front of her habit. Mr. Marconi, sister, take me to my daughter. Now. She turned at once and led him through the front hall. Lily was sitting on the edge of a leather chair in the headmistress's office, the toes of her polished shoes barely brushing the carpet. The moment the door opened and she saw who had come through it, her composure broke for the first time all morning. She was off the chair and across the room before anyone could speak. Her small body collided with his with a force that nearly buckled his knee. Her arms went around his neck, her face pressed into his shoulder. It was the first time in almost 5 years Dante had seen his daughter show anyone in public what she felt. He went down to one knee on the office carpet, the Brioni suit forgotten, and held her tightly. With his mouth against her hair, in a voice no one else in the room was meant to hear, he said, the only thing that mattered. I'm here, sweetheart. No one will touch you. Not while I breathe. Dante rose to his feet with Lily still in his arms, her cheek pressed against his shoulder, and carried her back to the leather chair. He did not set her down so much as lower her gently into it, his hand lingering on her back a moment longer than necessary. Sister Margaret stood near her desk, hands clasped tightly in front of her habit. Mr. Marconi, I owe you an apology. We should have contacted you the moment Mrs. Whitfield first noticed the woman. There is no excuse for the oversight. There isn't, Dante said. His voice was quiet. That was always worse than when he raised it. We will speak about your school's protocols when this matter is closed. Of course. Marco entered without knocking, a tablet in his hand, and the kind of expression that meant something useful had arrived. He set the device on the desk and angled it so Dante could see. School cameras. The angle is bad, but it's the best we have without pulling traffic feeds. Dante leaned over the screen. The footage was grainy, washed pale by overcast light, but the woman beyond the fence was no longer just an outline. She was thin, painfully so, light brown hair pulled back into a loose knot at the nape of her neck, a face that might have been pretty once, before exhaustion had hollowed it, and her eyes, even through the poor resolution, carried a kind of gray-blue sorrow that did not belong to a stranger. Lily climbed off the chair and came to stand at his elbow, peering up at the screen. She studied the image for a long moment. She doesn't look mean, Daddy, Lily said quietly. She just looks tired. Dante glanced down at his daughter. 6 years old, and she had read the woman's face more accurately in 5 seconds than most of his men would have in 5 minutes. He did not know whether to be proud or unsettled. Marco continued. Same pattern all 3 days. She arrives at 9:45, stands in the same spot until 10:30, then walks east, 86th Street subway station. We lose her after she changes trains in the Bronx. No vehicle, no companion, no phone calls she places near the school. She comes alone, and she leaves alone. Pull every camera within a 6-block radius. I want to know where she sleeps, already in motion. Lily reached up and tugged gently on the cuff of his jacket. He looked down. "Daddy." When she looked at me, it felt like she already knew me. Dante did not answer right away. The words had landed somewhere he was not prepared for them to land. He looked back at the screen, at the grainy face frozen in profile, at the hands wrapped around the worn rabbit, and something cold turned over slowly in his chest. For one unguarded second, his mind slipped backward. 5 years ago, a hospital room on the upper floor of Mount Sinai. Elena's hand in his, lighter than it had any right to be. The cancer had taken almost everything by then, even her voice. He had bent his head close to hers in the last hour, and she had whispered something he had carried with him every day since. "Don't let yourself disappear, Dante. Promise me." He had promised, and then he had broken that promise the very next month, and the month after, until the night a stranger arrived at his door with an infant in her arms and somehow saved him without ever knowing she had. He came back to the present with the same cold turning over inside him. He looked at the woman on the screen again. He had seen those eyes before. He could not place where, and the inability to place it was worse than the recognition itself. "Marco, boss, we're going to Greenwich. Now, send a second car ahead. I want the house secured before we arrive." Already done. Dante crouched down to Lily's level and brushed a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "We're going home, sweetheart. Not the apartment, the big house." Lily nodded without protest. She understood, in the way she always did, that the rules had shifted. He straightened and looked one last time at the tablet. The frozen image stared back at him, and for a reason he could not articulate. He could not look away from it for several seconds longer than he should have. He had seen those eyes before. He just did not yet know where. The Cadillac eased through the tall iron gates of the Marconi estate just past noon. 12 acres of manicured grounds opened on either side of the long gravel drive, bordered by old elms and hedges trimmed with the kind of precision only old money could afford. The house itself rose at the end of the drive in pale Italian stone, columns and arches and a red-tiled roof built by Dante's grandfather in 1962. Rosa was already at the front door before the car stopped, her silver hair pinned back, her apron folded neatly. She had served the Marconi family for 30 years. She had washed Dante's scraped knees when he was 8, and sat beside Elena's bed in the final week without ever leaving for longer than it took to make tea. When Lily stepped out, Rosa was on her knees on the front steps, arms open. "My little one, come here." Lily walked into her embrace without a word. "I made your soup," Rosa murmured. "The kind with the little pasta stars." Lily nodded into her shoulder. Dante came up the steps and let his hand rest briefly on Rosa's shoulder. They did not need to speak. Rosa already knew, from one look at his face, that something was wrong. The front door opened wider, and Vivian Cross stepped onto the threshold in a red silk dress that had clearly not been chosen for an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Her dark hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. The smile she arranged across her mouth was perfect. None of it was real. "Trouble at school again?" she asked, in a voice pitched too sweet to be sincere. Lily's small hand tightened around Rosa's. "Not your concern, Vivi," Dante said. Vivian's smile did not waver, but something moved behind her eyes. She crouched down theatrically. "Come here, sweetheart. Let me look at you." Lily took a quiet step backward, behind Rosa's apron. Vivian held the pose 1 second too long before straightening, the perfect smile thinning. "Right. Of course." She turned and walked back into the house, the click of her shoes against the marble louder than it needed to be. Rosa exhaled softly. "That child," she said under her breath, "has always known what grown people try to hide." Dante did not respond. He guided Lily inside, and once she had been handed off for soup and a warm bath, he walked the length of the front hall to his study. The door closed behind him like a vault ceiling. He dialed a number from memory. "Anthony, Dante, it has been a long time. I need a file." "Which file? You know which one?" Anthony Russo had drawn up the private adoption papers one rainy night 5 years ago, and had not raised the matter since. There was a long pause. "Has something happened?" "A woman has been standing outside Lily's school for 3 mornings, holding what looks very much like the rabbit Lily came to my house with." Anthony inhaled slowly. "I will have everything on your desk by morning." "Tonight." "Tonight?" Anthony agreed, and the line went dead. Upstairs, Lily slipped quietly away from Rosa's kitchen. Her bedroom opened off the long east corridor, painted in the pale blue Elena had once chosen for the nursery she would never use. Books lined 2 of the walls. A row of porcelain dolls sat above her writing desk. Lily did not go to the books, and she did not go to the dolls. She crossed to the wide bay window and climbed onto the cushioned seat, drawing her knees up to her chest. Beyond the glass, the gardens stretched in green order toward the tree line. Somewhere out there, beyond the gates, was a woman in a gray coat who had cried without making a sound. Lily watched the gardens for a long time. Then she slid off the window seat and crossed to the far side of her bed, to the small built-in drawer beneath the headboard that Rosa had told her, years ago, was just for her secrets. She pulled it open. From inside, beneath a folded piece of pink ribbon and an old birthday card, she lifted out a small white rabbit. Once white, the plush had grayed with time. One ear was bent permanently from being held the same way too many nights. She had owned it for as long as she could remember. She did not know where it had come from. She held it now in both hands, and the strangest, quietest feeling moved through her chest. The same feeling she had had at the fence that morning, when the woman had looked at her. The feeling of being known by someone she did not yet know. Anthony Russo did not wait until morning. He called back within the hour. Dante took the call, standing at the window of his study, looking out across the long western lawn where the afternoon light had begun to lean toward gold. "I'm sending the file to your secure inbox," Anthony said. "I never destroyed the original notes. I assumed there might come a day. There has, Sarah Bennett, 23 at the time of relinquishment, no fixed address. 1 year of nursing coursework at Bronx Community College, withdrew before completion. No criminal record, reason for surrender, a pause. The kind a man takes before stepping over a threshold he cannot step back across. Birth mother witnessed a homicide. Subject of active pursuit, by parties affiliated with organized crime, sought protective custody for child through informal channels." Dante closed his eyes. It had been 6 months after Elena's funeral. 6 months of not sleeping, of working the wrong end of the business himself, of a bottle of Macallan on the side table that emptied faster than the housekeeper could replace it. Rosa had stopped speaking to him about it. Marco had begun positioning men in rooms Dante was about to enter, because his judgment in those months could no longer be trusted to keep him alive. And then the rain. 2 o'clock in the morning. A storm rolling off the sound. The buzzer at the front gate. He remembered her standing in the entrance hall, water pooling on the marble around her shoes, her lips colorless with cold. He remembered the child in her arms, awake but silent. One tiny fist closed tightly around the ear of a small white rabbit. "I saw you, 2 weeks ago, the warehouse off 12th, the man with the limp." Dante had not moved. "I was at the laundromat across the alley. I saw through the back window. He begged you. He had a picture in his pocket of his daughter. You looked at the picture, and you let him walk out alive." Her voice had not shaken, though her hands had. "They say you are a monster. I saw you show mercy." She had told him about the boyfriend, a low-level courier for the Bianchi family, dead in an internal purge 2 weeks earlier. She had been in the next room. She had heard everything. She was the only living witness. "They will find me. I know they will. But if my daughter is under your roof, even Bianchi will not touch her. That is the only place in this city she will be safe." Dante had looked down at the child in her arms. The little girl had looked back at him with enormous, solemn dark eyes, and something in those eyes had reached into a place inside him that had been locked since the night he had buried his wife. Elena had never been allowed to be a mother. She had wanted that more than anything in the world. He had not made the decision so much as found that the decision had already been made somewhere beneath conscious thought. "One condition," he had said. "You do not contact her. You do not appear. If you break that, both of you die." She had nodded once. Anthony had been called. The papers had been drawn up before dawn. By sunrise, Sarah Bennett had walked back out into the rain with empty arms, and a 1-year-old child named Lily had been carried up the staircase of the Marconi estate for the first time. Still holding the white rabbit, Dante had quietly assigned 2 men to watch over Sarah from a distance for the first 6 months. They had reported her working a night shift at a diner in Yonkers, then a hospice upstate. Sometime in the 7th month, she had stepped onto a greyhound heading west, and the men had lost her. He had not searched after that. A promise was a promise. Now Dante sat in the quiet of his study with the screen glowing in front of him. And at last, he understood. The eyes he had recognized that morning on the grainy security footage outside St. Augustine's were the same eyes that had looked at him across his entrance hall in the rain 5 years ago. Sarah Bennett had come back. The hallway outside Dante's study was lit by a single sconce at the far end, and the door had been left an inch ajar. Vivian Cross stood with her back pressed lightly against the wood paneling and her breath held just shallow enough not to be heard through the gap. She had taken off her heels in the corridor and carried them in one hand. 18 months of being with Dante Marconi had taught her, among other things, how to move through this house without leaving a trace. 18 months. That was how long she had been calculating. She had not come into this relationship by accident. The gala at the plaza where they had first met had been arranged through 3 layers of mutual acquaintances, every one of whom she had cultivated. The dress she had worn that night had been chosen specifically for him. She knew what kind of women Dante Marconi noticed, and she had made herself into one of them. The plan had been simple. Become indispensable, become unremovable, become the next Mrs. Marconi, and there was only one obstacle in the way of that plan: the child, Lily, with her quiet, dark eyes that always seemed to see through whatever expression Vivian arranged on her face. Lily, who never quite leaned in for the embrace, never quite returned the smile, never quite relaxed in the same room with her. The child knew, the way animals knew, and Dante, for all his ruthlessness elsewhere, was soft toward his daughter in a way that meant Vivian would never be allowed to push the issue directly. Through the gap in the door, she heard Dante speaking on the phone in the slow, controlled tone he used only when something had gone wrong. She caught 2 words, and her face went still. Birth mother, then a name, Sarah Bennett. Vivian did not move for a count of 3, then she stepped backward, silent as a shadow, and walked the length of the corridor on bare feet until she reached her own bedroom at the far end of the east wing. She closed the door behind her, locked it, and crossed to the walk-in closet. From a hat box on the top shelf, behind a wall of designer handbags, she withdrew a small black phone, not the phone Dante knew about, the other one. She dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the second ring. "Tell me you have something useful," said a voice on the other end, low and gravelly with cigarettes. "There has been a development, Sal. For 6 months, she had been feeding Salvatore Bianchi pieces, movements, schedules, names of men in and out of the Greenwich estate. Information had been exchanged for money, and for something more important than money, which was the promise that when the Marconi family finally fell, she would be left standing among whatever rose to take its place." "What development?" "The girl's birth mother is back. She has been outside Lily's school for 3 days. Dante just got the file. The name is Sarah Bennett." A long silence on the other end. Long enough that Vivian began to wonder whether she had said something that had landed in a place she did not yet understand. Then, very quietly, Sal Bianchi laughed. "Sarah Bennett," he repeated. "Well, isn't that interesting? You know her. I know of her. She was the witness, the one who saw what happened to Tommy. We never could find her." Vivian's pulse picked up. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing. For now. You watch. You report. You do not act. Do you understand me, Vivian?" "Yes. This just became something larger than your wedding plans. Sweetheart, stay close. Stay quiet. I will tell you when to move." The line went dead. Vivian lowered the phone slowly, her perfect manicure white against the black plastic, and stared at her reflection in the closet mirror for a long moment without quite seeing it. 2 floors above, in the pale blue bedroom at the end of the east corridor, Lily sat cross-legged on her quilt with the white rabbit cradled in her lap. A soft knock came at the door, and Rosa entered carrying a tray with a small mug of warm milk and a plate of 2 shortbread cookies. "My little one, you have not come down for supper." "I'm not hungry, Rosa." Rosa set the tray on the writing desk and came to sit on the edge of the bed. Her eyes went, almost at once, to the rabbit in Lily's hands. "Rosa." "Yes, sweetheart. How long have I had this rabbit?" Rosa hesitated. It was a small hesitation, only a heartbeat. Lily caught it. "From the day you came to us, my love. You have never let it out of your sight." Lily was quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing the bent ear. "The woman at the school," she said softly. "She had one just like it." Rosa's hand, which had been smoothing Lily's hair, stopped moving. "Lots of people probably have rabbits that look the same, right?" Lily asked, her voice perfectly innocent. Rosa managed a thin smile and bent to kiss the top of her head, but her eyes, when they lifted again, had gone wide and worried in a way Lily was not meant to see. In her heart, the old woman had already guessed. By morning, Marco had her, a boarding house off Webster Avenue in the Bronx, 3 flights up, a single room with a shared bathroom at the end of the hall. The landlord remembered her. A quiet woman, paid 2 weeks in cash, no visitors, no trouble. She had given the name Sarah Bennett. She had not even bothered to use a false one. "Do we move her?" Marco asked. They were standing in Dante's study, the early sun slanting across the desk. "No, I go alone." Marco's expression did not change, but his silence carried weight. "Boss." "Alone, Marco." "And Miss Cross?" Dante did not look up from the file in front of him. "Vivian is not to know I have left the house. Tell her I am at the Manhattan office until evening." Marco understood the order beneath the order, and he nodded once and left. Dante drove himself, which he rarely did, and arranged the meeting through a single text message to a number Anthony Russo had supplied. Riverside Park, the bench at 110th, overlooking the Hudson, 11 o'clock. He arrived at 10:45. The morning was clear and cool, with the light off the river silver and unforgiving. A few joggers passed. A nanny pushed a stroller along the lower path. Dante sat with his coat unbuttoned and his hands folded in his lap and watched the water. She came along the path at 3 minutes to 11. Even from 20 yards away, he saw what 5 years had cost her. She had been thin then. She was thinner now, the kind of thin that did not belong to dieting or stress. Her face had lost its softness around the eyes and at the corners of the mouth. The gray coat hung looser on her shoulders than it had on the security footage. Cradled against her chest, exactly as it had been at the schoolyard fence, was the small white rabbit. He understood now what he had not understood until last night. There had been 2 of them, a pair. She had given Lily one and kept the other. She stopped a few feet from the bench. Her eyes met his, and held. "Mr. Marconi, sit down, Miss Bennett." She lowered herself onto the far end of the bench, the rabbit still against her chest, her hands trembling faintly around it. He did not turn his head toward her. "We had an agreement. I know. Why have you come back?" There was a long pause. The wind moved through the branches above them, and a gull cried somewhere over the water. "I am dying, Mr. Marconi." He did turn his head then. She kept her eyes forward. "Acute myeloid leukemia. They told me 3 months ago. They are giving me 4 months. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more." He did not speak. "I am not here to take her back. I would not do that to her. I would not do that to you." She drew a breath that caught somewhere in her chest. "I only wanted to see her one time before I go. To know I made the right choice. I was going to leave today. After this morning, I had already bought the bus ticket." The anger that had carried him from Greenwich to this bench began, quietly, to drain out of him. It did not leave anger in its place. It left something heavier and harder to name. "Where have you been?" he said. "Detroit, mostly. I worked at a charity hospice. I did the night shifts. The Bianchi people stopped looking when the rumor got around that I was dead. I let the rumor stand. I did not come within 400 miles of New York for almost 5 years. Then why now?" "I told you why." She turned, finally, and looked at him fully. Her eyes were the same gray blue he had recognized through the security footage, and they were the same eyes that had looked at him in his entrance hall in the rain. There were tears in them, but the tears did not fall. She had clearly learned, somewhere in the last 5 years, how to hold them. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat and withdrew an envelope, white, sealed, slightly bent at one corner. She placed it on the bench between them. "For her, when she is 18, or whenever you decide she should have it. I do not need her to know who I am. I do not need her to know I existed. I only needed to see her smile, to know she was happy." Dante looked down at the envelope, then at the woman who had placed her daughter into his arms when he had been a man too broken to be trusted with a kitten, and who had walked back out into a storm because she had decided he was the only chance her child had. He looked at the rabbit against her chest. He thought of Lily, asleep 2 floors above his study last night, holding the other one, Miss Bennett. "Yes, you are coming back to the house with me." Her head turned sharply. No. That is not what Lily deserves to know the truth. And you deserve more than one look from across a fence." For a moment, Sarah did not move. Then her face broke, in that quiet way that comes from people who have spent too many years not allowing themselves to break in front of anyone, and the tears she had been holding for 5 years, perhaps longer, finally came. Dante did not take her to Greenwich that day. He took her instead to a quiet apartment the family kept on the Upper East Side, 3 blocks off Park, the kind of address that did not draw attention because nothing about it had ever been meant to. A doorman who asked no questions. A floor that no other tenant shared. He had Marco bring up clean clothes from a private shop the family used, and he had Dr. Salazar, the physician who had attended to Elena in her final months, at the door within the hour. Sarah submitted to the examination without protest. She was too tired to protest anything. Dr. Salazar pulled Dante aside in the hallway afterward. "She is not lying about the prognosis. The disease is advanced. Whoever has been treating her in Detroit was working with almost no resources." He paused. "But with the right protocol, the right facility, the right care, 4 months can become a year, possibly longer. I would not promise more than that. Get me whoever in this country gives her the best odds. Tonight. Already making the call. When Dante returned to the living room, Sarah was sitting on the edge of the sofa with a cup of tea cooling in her hands, and the white rabbit beside her on the cushion. She looked up at him. You don't have to do this. I know. He sat in the armchair across from her. You are not going to die alone, Miss Bennett. You saved my daughter. I will save what I can of you. She lowered her face and closed her eyes for a long moment. He let her have it. When she opened her eyes again, he began, quietly, to tell her about the last 5 years. About the way Lily had begun reading on her own at 4, sounding out words on cereal boxes before anyone had taught her. About her stubbornness over which dress she would wear on which day. About her habit of arranging her stuffed animals in alphabetical order along her bookshelf. About the time she had fallen off a pony at a friend's birthday party and refused to cry in front of any of the other children, and only let the tears come once she was alone in the back of the car with him on the drive home. Sarah laughed. Then, through the tears that had begun again, the kind of small, wet laugh that hurt in the chest, she wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. Why you? Dante asked finally. Why not the police? Why not a church? She shook her head. Police can be bought. Bianchi has bought them before. A church could not have stopped a man like Salvatore from walking through its doors. But you, she looked at him, you had power that even the devil walks around. There was nowhere safer in this city than in your house. He absorbed that without speaking. After a moment, she asked, very quietly, your wife, did she know about Lily? Elena died 6 months before you came to my door. Sarah's hand moved toward her mouth. Cancer, like you. We never had the chance to have a child of our own. She wanted that more than anything, and the disease took even that from her. His voice did not waver, but it had gone very soft. When you put Lily into my arms that night, I felt as though Elena had reached down from somewhere and sent me a gift I had no right to. Sarah's tears were silent now, sliding down her face the way they had through the iron bars of the schoolyard fence. Then we saved each other, she whispered. He did not answer, because there was no answer that did not feel small. He left her at the apartment that night with a guard on the door and a private nurse arranged for the morning. He drove back to Greenwich himself, slowly, with the windows down and the spring air cold against his face. By the time he reached the estate, it was past midnight. Rosa was still up, as he had known she would be. He sat with her in the kitchen and told her, quietly, what he had learned and what he intended to do. He told Marco the same thing in the front hall. No one else is to know yet, he said. Not the staff, not the men, and not Vivienne. Especially not Vivienne. Marco nodded once. He had stopped trusting Vivienne months ago, though he had not yet been able to articulate why. Rosa folded her dish towel slowly and looked up at Dante with the gentle, unflinching gaze she had used on him since he was a boy. The child deserves to know, sir. I know she does. Lily is stronger than you think. I know that too. He climbed the stairs to his bedroom and stood for a long time at his window, looking out across the dark gardens. Tomorrow he would have to find a way to tell a 6-year-old girl that the woman she had seen crying through a fence was the mother she had been carrying inside her bones all along, and that the same woman might not be alive to see her grow up. Vivienne left the estate at 9 in the morning for a standing appointment at a spa in Manhattan, an appointment Dante had specifically arranged not to interfere with. The moment her car cleared the front gate, Marco was already pulling the second Escalade around to the rear service entrance. Sarah stepped out of it onto the back terrace 20 minutes later, the white rabbit held against her chest, her face pale beneath the spring light. Rosa was waiting at the kitchen door. She did not say anything at first. She only opened her arms. Sarah, who did not know her, walked into them anyway. Come, child, Rosa said quietly, in the voice she had used for 30 years on every wounded thing that had ever crossed this threshold. You have walked a long way. Lily was in the library at the far end of the main hall, curled up in the green leather chair by the fireplace with a book of Greek myths open in her lap. The morning sun came through the tall windows behind her and lit the blue ribbons in her hair. Dante stepped into the room alone. He sat down on the ottoman in front of her chair so that his eyes were level with hers. Sweetheart, I need to tell you a story. A true one. Lily closed the book without marking the page. He told her, as plainly and gently as he knew how, about a rainy night 5 years ago, about a young woman who had appeared at the front door of the Greenwich house in a storm at 2 in the morning, soaked to the skin, holding a child wrapped in a thin blanket, about how that child had been held tightly against the woman's shoulder, with one small fist closed around the ear of a white rabbit. Lily's eyes grew slowly wider as he spoke. She did not interrupt. That baby was you, Lily, and the woman who brought you to me was your birth mother. The library was very quiet. Lily was silent for a long time. He let her have the silence. When she spoke at last, her voice was small but extraordinarily steady. Is she still alive? Yes, sweetheart. She is. Another pause. Is she here? Yes. Lily did not cry. She only reached for his hand and folded both of hers tightly around it, the way she did when she was trying to hold something in. It's the woman from the school, isn't it? Yes. She nodded once. Then she slid off the chair, looked up at him with that same solemn dark gaze, and walked out of the library and up the staircase to the second floor. He did not call after her. She came back down 2 minutes later, carrying the white rabbit she had taken from the secret drawer beneath her headboard. She stopped in front of him with the rabbit held against her chest, in almost exactly the same way Sarah had held its twin yesterday at the riverside bench. Daddy. Yes. Is she nice? She loved you enough, Dante said, to bring you to me, even though it broke her heart. Lily took that in. He could see her arranging it inside herself, the way she always arranged difficult things, fitting it carefully into a space she could carry. A soft sound came from the doorway. Sarah stood at the threshold of the library with Rosa just behind her, hesitant, one hand pressed lightly against the doorframe as though she needed it to stay upright. Lily turned. For a long moment, no one in the room moved or spoke. A mother and a daughter looked at each other for the first time in 5 years across a sunlit Persian rug, with a man who loved them both watching from an ottoman between them. Lily took a small step forward. She lifted the white rabbit from against her chest and held it out, the way a child shows another child a treasured thing. Do you have one of these? This is mine. Sarah's hand went, almost involuntarily, into the pocket of her gray coat. She drew out the second rabbit, a near-perfect mirror of the first, the same gray plush, the same bent ear, the same slightly crooked stitching across the small chest. A small breath escaped Lily, half wonder, half recognition. They match. Sarah lowered herself carefully to her knees on the rug. The motion was slow, the kind of slow that comes from a body that has stopped being well, but Lily did not seem to notice. I have kept this rabbit for 5 years, sweetheart, Sarah said. Her voice was steady only because she was forcing it to be. They were made by my grandmother, your great-grandmother. She made them as a pair. For twins, she thought I might have one day. I gave one to you when you were born. I kept the other one because I needed something that still smelled like you. Lily looked from the rabbit in her own hands to the rabbit in Sarah's, then back at Sarah's face. She did not pause to think about it. She did not look at Dante for permission. She crossed the last bit of distance between them and put her small arms around Sarah's neck, the way a child puts her arms around something her body has been waiting for, without her mind quite knowing it. Sarah closed her eyes and held on. Across the room, Rosa lifted her apron silently to her face. Dante did not move at all. He only watched, with his hand still resting where Lily's fingers had let it go, and understood that whatever came next, he could not undo what had just happened in this room. The spa called Vivian's car at 11 to apologize. A burst pipe in the treatment wing. Her appointment would have to be rescheduled. The driver turned the car around on Park Avenue and headed back toward Connecticut. She arrived at the estate just before noon, 2 hours earlier than anyone in the house had expected. The front hall was empty when she came through the door. The staff had been quietly cleared from the main floor on Dante's orders, though Vivian did not yet know that. She set her purse on the entry table and was halfway to the staircase when she heard it. Laughter. Lily's laughter. Bright, unguarded, real laughter, coming from somewhere down the long hall. Vivian stopped on the second step. In 18 months of living in this house, she had heard Lily laugh perhaps 3 times, and never that way. She turned and walked silently down the corridor toward the library. The door was ajar by perhaps 4 inches. She did not push it open. She tilted her head and looked through the gap. She saw Dante on the ottoman. She saw Lily sitting on the rug. And she saw, between them, kneeling on the Persian carpet with one of her hands resting lightly on the child's, a thin woman in a gray sweater whose face Vivian had not seen in person before but recognized instantly. The woman from the security footage. The woman who, she now knew, was named Sarah Bennett. The blood went out of Vivian's face in a single, slow drop. Her plan, the plan she had spent 18 months building stone by stone, had a body now. A body sitting on a rug in a sunlit room, holding hands with the child Vivian had been working around for over a year. She arranged her face in the time it took to draw 2 breaths, fixed the perfect smile across her perfect mouth, and pushed the library door open. "Oh," she said brightly. "Are we entertaining guests?" 3 faces turned toward her. Sarah's hand drew back instinctively from Lily's. Dante rose to his feet without hurry. Vivienne, you are home early. The spa cancelled. Imagine my surprise. Her eyes had not left Sarah. And who is this? An old friend of the family, Dante said evenly. Sarah, this is Vivienne. Vivienne, Sarah. She will be staying with us for a while. Sarah did not stand. She did not extend a hand. She managed only a small, careful nod. Vivienne's smile stretched a fraction wider and a fraction thinner. It was the family part of old friend of the family that told her everything. Dante was lying to her. He had decided to lie to her. He had decided, in his own house, that she was not to know the truth. That, more than the woman on the rug, was what struck the match. Lily slid off the carpet and reached for Sarah's hand again. Come on, she said. I want to show you the garden. There's a koi pond. Sarah let herself be drawn up to her feet, slowly, and Lily led her past Vivienne and out of the library without looking up. The two of them disappeared down the hall. Vivienne waited until their footsteps had faded, and then she turned to Dante. Who is she really, Dante? As I said, an old friend. Old friends don't sit on the floor with your daughter. This one does. I am the woman you are sleeping with. I have a right to know who is being brought into this house. Dante's gaze, when it settled on her, was perfectly level and entirely without warmth. You are a woman I am dating. There is a difference. The words landed with a small, almost surgical precision. 18 months of careful work, 18 months of being seen as something more, reduced in a single sentence to the only thing she had ever actually been to him. She did not let her face show it. She had spent her whole life learning not to let her face show things. I see, she said softly. Good. He walked past her, out of the library, in the direction Sarah and Lily had gone. In the garden, on the iron bench beside the koi pond, Sarah sat with her arm around Lily's small shoulders. The early afternoon sun came down through the dogwoods, scattered and pale. Why did you have to go away? Lily asked. Because there were people who would have hurt you if I stayed near you. Sweetheart, I went away so they would forget about you. What is your job? I help sick people, in a place where they go when they are very tired. Did you love me? Every single day, for 5 years. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Are you going to stay with me? Sarah's arm tightened, almost imperceptibly. She did not look down at the child against her side. I will stay with you for as long as I possibly can, sweetheart, as long as I possibly can. 2 stories above them, framed in the second-floor window of her bedroom, Vivienne Cross stood watching the bench by the koi pond. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest. Her perfect face had gone very still. Her eyes were on fire. The guest suite Sarah had been given was at the far end of the west wing, 3 doors down from the main staircase. Rosa had laid out a clean nightgown and set a small lamp on the bedside table. The window faced the orchard, and from it, on a clear night, you could see the lights of the boathouse down by the pond. Sarah had been lying in bed for an hour, not sleeping. When she heard the soft sound of bare feet outside her door, she sat up. The door eased open. Lily stood in the gap in a long white nightgown, her braids undone for the night, the white rabbit tucked under one arm. She did not say anything. She only looked at Sarah, the way a child looks when she is waiting to be invited. Come here, sweetheart. Lily climbed onto the bed and settled herself into the curve of Sarah's arm, as though she had done it every night of her life. Sarah folded the quilt up over both of them. Mama, Lily whispered. Can I tell you a secret? Sarah's chest pulled tight at the word. She had not been called that in any conscious memory the child possessed. Yes, baby, you can tell me anything. Lily was quiet for a moment, gathering it. Then it came out, softly, the way a child who has held something too long finally lets it down. She doesn't like me. Who, sweetheart? Vivienne. When Daddy is not in the room, she looks at me like I am something dirty, like I am garbage that nobody took out. Sarah went very still. How long has this been happening? A long time. Since she came. Why have you not told your father? Lily took a small breath. Because every time I almost did, Vivienne would say, Your daddy already lost your mommy, Elena. Do you really want to make him sad again? And she said if I told him, he would think I was a bad child. He would think I was the trouble in the house, not her. Sarah's hand began, very slowly, to stroke the back of her daughter's hair. What has she done, baby? It came in pieces, the way these things always come in pieces from a child. The orange juice spilled across her homework the night before a project was due. The hard pinch on the inside of her arm at the dinner table when no one was looking, leaving a mark Vivienne told her to say came from a fall. The afternoon Vivian had taken the white rabbit from her room while she was at school and dropped it into the kitchen trash, and Rosa had quietly fished it out before the bag went to the bin. The thunderstorm last August, when Lily had been on the back terrace with her watercolors and Vivian had come outside, gone back inside, and locked the terrace door behind her. Lily had stood in the rain for almost 20 minutes before Marco had come around the side of the house and seen her through the kitchen window. One time she pinched me hard enough that it went purple. She said if I told Daddy, she would tell him I fell off the swing and that I was lying because I wanted attention. Sarah did not speak for a long moment. She could not, just yet. She only held the small body against her own and pressed her lips to the crown of her daughter's head, and waited until her voice could be trusted. Baby, why didn't you tell him? Lily's answer was very small. Because Daddy is lonely, Mama. He stands at the window at night sometimes and looks at the picture of Mommy Elena. He thinks I'm asleep, but I see him. He has already lost somebody. I didn't want him to lose somebody else. Sarah closed her eyes. There it was, the shape of the thing. A 6-year-old girl, carrying the weight of a grown man's grief, choosing to swallow her own pain rather than add to his. Sarah's daughter had been protecting Dante Marconi from the inside of his own house, alone, for who knew how many months. And why are you telling me, sweetheart? Why am I the one? Lily considered that very carefully, the way she considered everything that mattered. Because you don't belong to this house yet. You can leave if you don't like me. Daddy can't make Vivian leave without being sad about it. But you, Mama, you can just be on my side. Sarah felt the tears come, hot and silent, and did not try to stop them this time. Listen to me, baby. Listen carefully. You are not going to carry this by yourself anymore. Mama is here now. Mama is going to find a way. I do not know yet how, but I promise you, she is not going to touch you again, and you are never, ever going to lie about your bruises again. Lily nodded against her chest. After a while, the small body in Sarah's arms grew heavier. The breathing slowed. The hand wrapped around the white rabbit went loose. For the first time in 5 years, Lily Marconi fell asleep against the body of the woman who had carried her into the world. Sarah did not sleep at all. Sarah eased out of the bed at 6 in the morning, careful not to disturb the small body still curled into the pillow beside her. Lily did not stir. The white rabbit was tucked under her chin, its bent ear resting against her cheek. Sarah pulled on a borrowed sweater, drew the door of the guest suite closed behind her with a soft click, and went down the back stairs to the kitchen. Vivian was already there. She sat on a high stool at the marble island, in a silk robe the color of pale champagne, both hands wrapped around a porcelain cup. Her hair was twisted up into a careless knot that had taken 30 minutes to look careless. Her face was bare of makeup and somehow more dangerous for it. When Sarah stepped through the kitchen doorway, Vivian did not look up. How long do you intend to stay? Sarah crossed to the counter and reached for the coffee pot. Her hand was steady. She had decided, an hour ago in the dark, exactly how this conversation was going to go. Long enough, she said quietly, to know that you have been hurting my daughter. The cup paused halfway to Vivian's mouth. Then she set it down, carefully, on the saucer, and turned on the stool. Your daughter, my daughter, Vivian laughed. It was a small, brittle sound. Lily is Dante Marconi's daughter. You are a stray he has taken in for a week. Don't get confused about which side of the door you stand on. Sarah poured the coffee. She did not raise her voice. She had spent 5 years working in a hospice. She had stopped needing to raise her voice at anyone a long time ago. I do not care what you think I am. I do not need you to call me anything. But if you put your hands on my daughter again, even a look that lasts too long, you will regret it. Are you threatening me? Vivian's mouth tilted into a thin smile. You have no power in this house, Sarah Bennett. You have a name on a sealed file and a few months of nostalgia, and that is all. Sarah lifted the cup. I do not need power, she said. I only need to tell Dante what Lily told me last night. The smile thinned further. The color in Vivian's face went. She caught it almost at once, but not quickly enough. She is a child. Children make things up. Not this one, Sarah said. Not about the orange juice on the homework. Not about the rabbit in the trash. Not about the locked terrace door in the rain. And not about the bruise on the inside of her arm. For a moment, the kitchen was so quiet that the hum of the refrigerator sounded loud. A footstep came in from the hallway. Rosa appeared in the doorway carrying a small tray with sliced fruit and a plate of pastries. She had been on the back stair for at least the last full exchange. Her eyes, when they found Vivian, had no warmth in them at all. I have suspected you for a long time, Rosa said quietly. She did not raise her voice either. She did not need to. Now I am sure. Vivian stood. The stool scraped back across the tile. Excuse me. she said, with the perfect, practiced lightness of a woman remembering an appointment, and walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, behind the locked door of her bedroom, the perfect lightness fell off her face like a wet sheet. She crossed to the closet, dragged down the hat box, pulled out the black phone, and dialed. It rang twice. "Tell me you have something useful," said the voice on the other end. "It is worse, Sal. The mother has been here less than a day, and the child has already told her everything. The old woman has heard. They will go to him with it. I need you to move." A pause. "Calm down, sweetheart. He will throw me out by tonight." "He will not throw you out by tonight. He is a man who likes to verify before he acts. You have at least a few days, probably a week. Stay quiet. Let her talk. Let the mother stay. The longer she is in that house, the better for what I am planning." "What you are planning?" "Things you do not need the shape of yet, sweetheart. You watch. You report. That is your job." The line went dead. Vivienne sat on the edge of her bed with the phone still in her hand. She did not understand the full shape of what Sal Bianchi was building, but she understood that her hand was still on the table, and so long as it was, she had not yet lost. Down in the garden, on the stone path between the rose beds, Lily was crouched beside Rosa, examining a snail on a flat leaf with the concentrated solemnity she brought to all small living things. She heard Sarah's footsteps before she saw her. She turned, her whole face opened. "Mama!" She came across the gravel at a run. Sarah caught her, lifted her, and held her against her chest, and the morning sunlight fell across the two of them as though they had been there together every morning of Lily's life. By the second afternoon, Vivienne had decided that Sal Bianchi's patience was a luxury she could no longer afford. If Sarah lived, Sarah would talk. If Sarah talked, Dante would put it together. And once Dante put it together, no plan of Sal's would matter, because Vivienne herself would not survive long enough to see it executed. The solution presented itself, neatly, in the medical chart Dr. Salazar had left on the desk in the upstairs library. Sarah Bennett, acute myeloid leukemia, compromised platelets. Anyone with that blood work who began to bleed would not stop bleeding easily. Vivienne spent 40 minutes that afternoon at the desktop computer in the small reading nook off her bedroom, researching anticoagulants. She had a private prescription pad from a doctor in Manhattan she had paid off 2 years ago for entirely different reasons. By 3 o'clock, a small vial of liquid sat in her cosmetics case. At 4, Sarah went out to the back terrace to read. Lily was upstairs at her piano lesson, with the woman who came on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The kitchen was empty for 10 minutes. Vivienne had been watching for those 10 minutes for 2 days. The pitcher of cranberry pomegranate juice on the counter was for Sarah. Rosa poured her a glass with every meal because Dr. Salazar had said it would help her count. Vivienne stood with her back deliberately to the corner camera, her body shielding the counter, and emptied the vial into the pitcher. She rinsed the small bottle in the sink, dried it on a paper towel, and dropped both into the bin under 3 layers of other trash. At 4:15, Rosa carried out the tray. Sarah drank 1 glass and a few sips of a second. By 4:45, the back of her throat had begun to taste of metal. By 5 o'clock, the bleeding had started. Lily came back downstairs from her piano lesson at 5:15, looking for her mother, and found the door of the guest bath at the end of the west hall ajar. She pushed it open. Sarah was on the tile floor. There was blood on the white sink, blood on the front of her blouse, blood pooling slowly on the marble around her face. She was conscious. Her eyes met Lily's. Lily did not scream. Lily ran. She made it down the long corridor to the front hall in 8 seconds, and she did not stop running until she found Marco in the courtyard. Marco was in the upstairs bathroom 30 seconds later. Dante was on the phone to Dr. Salazar within 90. The Escalade was on the drive, with Sarah in the back seat, and Marco's hand pressed flat against a folded towel under her nose. In under 4 minutes, Dante drove. He did not let anyone else drive. Lily sat in the front passenger seat with her hands clenched white in her lap and did not say a word the entire way to the private surgical wing on the Upper East Side. Dr. Salazar met them at the side entrance. The blood work came back inside an hour. "This is not the disease," he said quietly to Dante in the corridor outside the room where Sarah now lay sleeping under sedation, an IV running into her arm. "This is anticoagulant toxicity, a high oral dose. Someone gave it to her." Dante did not answer for a long moment. The hallway lights were very bright. How close was it? 20 more minutes without intervention. Maybe 30. Dante nodded once. In the room, Lily sat on the edge of the high hospital bed and held Sarah's hand with both of her own. "You have to live, Mama," she whispered. "I just found you." Sarah's eyes opened, slowly, and a small, wet smile moved at the corner of her mouth. I will try, baby. I promise. I will try. Back at the estate, Marco and Rosa sat in the security room watching the kitchen footage from 4 o'clock onward. Vivienne had been smart. Her body had been carefully placed between the counter and the camera lens for the entire 40 seconds that mattered. There was no clean shot of her hands, but Marco rewound the corridor footage 3 times and saw something else. Vivienne had walked into the kitchen at 3:48 that afternoon, a time of day at which she had not entered the kitchen on any other day in the 18 months he had been monitoring her movements. She had stayed for less than a minute. She had walked back out with nothing in her hands. It was not proof, but Marco had spent most of his life learning to read absences. He read this one perfectly. Dante came through the front gate of the estate at 12 minutes past midnight. Vivienne was in the front sitting room, in a cashmere robe, a glass of red wine on the side table, the picture of a woman waiting up out of concern. "Darling, is she all right? What did you do this afternoon, Vivienne?" She blinked, and the surprise that crossed her face was almost flawless. "I went shopping with Bella on Madison. We had lunch at Bemelman's. You can call her if you want." He looked at her for a long moment. He did not have proof. Not yet, but he no longer needed it for himself. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Go to bed." By morning, 2 new men had been added to the household staff. Both were Marco's. One stood in the kitchen at all hours. Every glass and every plate that came up to Sarah's room was tasted by him before it reached her. That night, Dante stood for a long time beside Lily's bed, watching her sleep with the white rabbit tucked under her chin. "No one," he said softly to no one but himself, "is going to harm her mother. Not while I am still in this house." Sarah came home from the hospital on the 4th day. She was paler than she had been before, and the hollows beneath her eyes had darkened, but Dr. Salazar had stopped the bleeding cleanly, and her counts were already climbing again. She walked through the front door of the Marconi estate on Marco's arm, and Lily came down the staircase at a run and did not let go of her for the rest of the afternoon. That evening, in the small sitting room off Dante's study, he closed the door and sat across from Sarah on the green damask sofa. "I want you to stay, Dante, not as a guest, not for a few months. I have spoken to a specialist at Memorial Sloan Kettering. There is a clinical trial. He wants to see you next week. If the trial is right for you, the protocol could give you years, Sarah, not weeks, years." She looked down at her hands in her lap. "Why?" "Because Lily deserves you. Because you deserve more than 4 months in a boarding house in the Bronx. And because I owe you a debt I have not finished paying." Her eyes filled. She did not answer with words. She nodded. 2 floors above, behind the closed door of her bedroom, Vivienne was already at work on the second plan. She had spent the 4 days Sarah was in the hospital reading the room Dante now occupied around her. She understood. The first attempt had failed, and any further attempt on Sarah would be intercepted before it left the kitchen. The food taster stood by the stove from sunrise to 10 at night. Marco had men in places Marco's men had never been before, so she changed the target. If Sarah could not be killed, then Sarah could be broken. And the only thing in this house capable of breaking Sarah Bennett was the one thing the security perimeter still treated as ordinary: a child. Lily had a habit, the old wooden ladder in the orchard, the one the gardeners used in apple season, leaned against the side of the tool shed year-round, and Lily liked to climb it. From the 3rd rung, she could see over the wall into the neighbor's pony pasture. She had been told not to. She did it anyway, 2 or 3 afternoons a week. Vivienne went down to the tool shed at 1 in the morning, in a dark coat, and worked on the bolts at the top of the ladder for almost 20 minutes with a pair of garden shears. She did not cut the rungs through. She loosened the upper crosspiece just enough that under any weight above the 2nd rung, it would give. The next afternoon, Sarah took Lily out to the orchard. Lily ran ahead, the way she always did, and went straight for the ladder. She had her foot on the 1st rung when Sarah stopped walking. Something had moved across her chest, the way it had moved across her chest the morning before the orange juice on the homework, the way it had moved on the night of the locked terrace door, the instinct of a woman who had lost too much already to ignore the small voice that said, "Not this time. Lily, come down. But Mama, I want to show you the ponies. Come down, baby. Come to me. We'll find a different way to look." Lily heard the tone. She climbed back down at once. Sarah took her hand and walked her 10 feet away, and they stood in the grass of the orchard looking at the ladder for a long moment, as if it were an animal that might or might not bite. The gardener came around the corner with a coil of hose 10 minutes later. Sarah called to him, "Daniel, could you check that ladder for me, please?" He climbed up. On the 3rd rung, the upper crosspiece gave, and the entire ladder folded away from the wall and crashed into the dirt. He landed hard on his shoulder. Lily flinched against Sarah's hip. Marco was on the lawn within a minute, pulling the ladder upright. He examined the bolts and the cuts on the rope guide. He did not need long. This was deliberate, boss, he said quietly into his earpiece. Someone did this last night. Dante called every member of the household into the front hall within the hour. Rosa stood with her arms folded, her chin lifted. The two new kitchen men flanked the doorway. Sarah held Lily against her side. Vivian stood at the foot of the staircase in a beige cashmere wrap, the picture of bewildered concern. Dante did not waste time. Rosa. I saw her, sir. Rosa did not look at anyone but Vivian. Last night. She went into the tool shed at 1:15 in the morning. I was up with my hip and saw from the kitchen window. I did not say anything because I did not know what she had done. Now I do. Vivian's mouth opened. You are lying. You are an old woman. You have hated me from the first day. You cannot stand. Search her room, Dante said. You will not. Search her room. Marco was already on the stairs. It took 8 minutes. He came back down with 3 things in a clean white evidence bag. A pair of garden gloves with cut marks across the palms. A small black flip phone that did not match any device on Dante's known inventory. And on that phone, an unread thread to a New Jersey number. Marco handed the phone to Dante without speaking. Dante read. He read for a full minute. His face did not change. The lack of change was worse than rage would have been. When he looked up again, his eyes were the coldest thing in the house. 6 months, he said quietly. 6 months you have been feeding Salvatore Bianchi from inside my walls. Vivian's knees folded onto the marble. Dante, please. I love you. I only ever wanted us to be safe. I only ever wanted. You tried to kill the woman I gave my word to. You tried to kill the child I am raising. Dante, safety, he said. Bought with the blood of a 6-year-old. Dante did not kill her. He could have. There were 2 men in the doorway who would have done it without question. And a bag of lime in a shed on the property that had been used twice before for less. But Lily was 4 feet away from him, holding her mother's hand and watching with eyes that missed nothing. And Dante had decided a very long time ago that whatever else his daughter would inherit from him, she would not inherit the sight of a body on the marble of her own front hall. Marco, boss, get her out of my house. Vivian came up off her knees in a sudden lunge. Dante, please, you cannot do this. I gave you Marco caught her by the upper arm without effort. Dante looked at her with the same flat, cold gaze. You have 24 hours to leave this state. If I see you again, in this state or any other, or if I hear you have placed a single phone call to Salvatore Bianchi, you will simply not be anywhere anymore. Do you understand me, Vivian? You will regret this, she screamed, as Marco turned her toward the front door. Sal will not forgive you for what you have just done. He will not. The front door closed behind them. The Escalade pulled out of the drive 90 seconds later, and the sound of her voice was carried away with it down the long gravel road. The front hall was very quiet. Rosa stepped forward and bent, and gathered Lily against her apron, and the 2 of them stood there for a moment without speaking. Sarah had not moved. She was still holding Lily's other hand, and the hand had not loosened the entire time. In the front sitting room, 10 minutes later, Sarah sat on the sofa with Lily curled in her lap. The afternoon light came through the long windows and fell across the rug in pale, slanting rectangles. Is she gone, Mama? Yes, baby. She is gone. Lily was silent for a moment, her fingers playing with the cuff of Sarah's sweater. I was scared of her, Mama. The way she looked at me like she hated me a lot. I know, baby. Will she come back? She will not come back, sweetheart. Not ever. Your father has made certain of that. Lily considered that, and then nodded slowly into her chest. The door of the sitting room opened, and Dante came in. He stopped just inside, looked at the 2 of them, and crossed quietly to the sofa. He sat down on Sarah's other side without saying anything for a long moment. Finally, he said, I am sorry. Lily looked up at him. I did not see what was happening inside my own house. I should have seen it. I should have seen it months ago. I am sorry, sweetheart. Lily slid out of Sarah's lap and into his. I do not blame you, Daddy. You were lonely. Lonely people do not always see. Dante closed his eyes for a long second and held his daughter against him without speaking. Over the top of Lily's head, his eyes met Sarah's, and a small, silent thing passed between them, the kind of understanding that does not need to be said, the kind that is built out of children, and danger, and the shared knowledge of having very nearly lost the same thing. That night, after Lily had been put to bed with the white rabbit tucked under her chin, and Rosa sitting in the armchair by the door reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. Dante asked Sarah to come out onto the small private balcony off his study. The night was cool. The sky beyond the cypress trees was a deep, clean black. "I do not want you to live in fear, Sarah. I do not want Lily to live in fear. I know. I am asking you to stay. Permanently. Not as a guest. Not for the trial." He paused. He chose the word carefully. "As family." Sarah did not look at him for a long time. She understood what he was offering, and what he was not. He was not offering her his bed. He was not offering her the place that had once been Elena's. He was offering her something quieter and, in its own way, more permanent. A roof, a name, a side of the table. "Lily deserves to have both of us," she said softly. "Yes, all right." Dante turned his head. "And you," he said, "deserve more than 4 months. Whatever this trial costs, whatever doctor in any country in the world is best for what you are facing, I will find him. I will pay him. I will fly him in. You are not going to die on my watch, Sarah Bennett. Not while there is anything left for me to do about it." Sarah lowered her face. The tears that had begun, very quietly, were not the tears of grief. They were the tears of a woman who, for the first time in her entire life, had been told by another human being that she was worth saving. Below them, on the floor of the music room, soft notes had begun to drift up through an open window. Lily had crept down the back stairs in her nightgown to play one slow, careful piece on the piano before Rosa caught her. Rosa stood in the doorway of the music room with her arms folded and watched the small back, the bent head, the small hands moving across the keys. She did not stop her. She only smiled. The warehouse sat off Van Brunt Street in Red Hook, behind a row of dry-docked fishing trawlers that had not moved in 15 years. The sign on the front door said Bianchi Import and Supply in faded gold letters. There had not been an honest crate of anything inside the building since 1983. Vivienne arrived at 11:30 that night in a town car she had paid for in cash. She had not crossed the state line. She had not even crossed the Hudson. She had checked into a hotel in Midtown under a name on a passport Dante did not know about, and from there she had come straight to Brooklyn. 2 men with neck tattoos led her through the side door without a word. Sal Bianchi was sitting at a steel desk under a single hooded lamp at the far end of the main floor. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, head shaved smooth, a long scar running from the corner of his right eye down into his jaw. He did not stand when she walked in. "You did not leave the state. No. You were told to leave the state. I have something for you, Sal. Something you will want before you decide what I am worth." He leaned back in the steel chair. The lamp threw the scar into shadow. "You have failed me, Vivienne. You have been thrown out of the house I planted you in. You are no longer of any use to me. I am being very polite about that, considering." Sarah Bennett. He did not move. The woman in the Marconi house. The mother of the child. 6 years ago, Sal. The witness. The silence in the warehouse stretched. Sal leaned forward slowly, both forearms on the desk. Tommy Calabrese. She was in the next room when it happened. She heard everything. She is the reason no one in this city ever closed that file. Vivienne stepped further into the lamplight. She has been alive for 6 years, Sal. In Detroit, mostly. And now she is sitting in Dante Marconi's dining room, and the child upstairs is hers. Sal Bianchi did not speak for almost a full minute. When he did, his voice had dropped half an octave. "You are sure of this?" "I read the file. I saw the route the night she came to the house. I have heard her say the name of the laundromat across the alley from the warehouse off 12th. A slow, deliberate smile moved across his mouth. It was not a pleasant smile. It belonged to the kind of man who had waited a very long time for the right reason to do a thing he had already decided to do. "Then this is no longer a war over warehouses, sweetheart. No. This is family." He stood. He crossed to a steel shelf at the back of the floor and lifted down a manila folder Vivienne had not seen before. "There is a benefit night at St. Augustine's 2 weeks from Friday. A children's recital. Your little Lily is on the program. Piano. Chopin, I am told. How do you— I have had a man on that school payroll for 4 months, Vivienne. A guard named Patrick. He wears the uniform. He runs the back hallway by the music wing. He is not paid much by the school. He is paid a great deal more by me." Sal opened the folder and slid it across the desk. "Sarah Bennett will be there. Dante Marconi will be there. The girl will be backstage, in a small dressing room with 1 bodyguard at the door. Not 2, not 3, 1. The auditorium will be full of donors. Marconi will not turn that room into a war zone. He will not draw a weapon in front of 300 Manhattan parents holding programs. Vivienne stared at the folder. You will take her. I will take both of them. The mother to settle Tommy. The girl to bring Dante through my door on his knees. Vivienne's mouth tilted. I want to see him kneel. You will see, Sal said quietly. Considerably more than that. 2 miles north and 40 miles east. In the music room of the Marconi estate, the chandelier above the grand piano had been turned low, and the Steinway was open. Lily sat on the bench in her white nightgown with her hair down for bed, but her piano teacher had stayed for an extra hour after dinner because Friday's recital had become important to all of them. The piece was the second movement of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat. She was almost there. Sarah sat on the small velvet sofa by the window with her knees tucked under her, the white rabbit on the cushion beside her, listening with her hand pressed lightly against her mouth. Dante came through the doorway from his study and stopped at the entrance to the room. He did not interrupt. He stood for a long moment and watched his daughter's small hands moving across the keys, and his eyes drifted to Sarah on the sofa and the line of her profile in the low light. He crossed the room without making a sound and sat down beside her. After a moment, almost without thinking, he laid his hand over the back of hers on the velvet. She did not pull away. The music kept rising. None of the three of them, in that warm and lit and quiet room, had any way of knowing that 2 weeks from Friday, the life they had only just begun to build was already being measured for a coffin in a warehouse in Red Hook. 2 Fridays later, the auditorium of St. Augustine's Academy was full. Sarah wore a deep blue silk dress that Rosa had taken in twice for her thinner frame. Her hair, which had begun to grow back darker than it had been, was pinned in a soft twist at the nape of her neck. Her color was better than it had been in months. The trial protocol at Sloan Kettering had begun to take. Lily wore white, with 2 French braids and a pale green ribbon at the end of each. She had not stopped moving all afternoon. She had practiced her Chopin 12 times in the morning and refused lunch. Dante wore black. He had doubled the security at the school perimeter. Marco and 4 men in the building, 2 more in the parking lot, a car running on the avenue. He had argued with himself for 3 days about whether to allow Lily to perform at all, and Lily, with the stubbornness she had inherited from no one he could name, had won. The lights came down at 7. Lily was the 11th child to play. When the headmistress called her name, she walked across the stage in her white dress with her chin lifted, the way Dante had taught her to walk into rooms, and she sat down at the Steinway. Then she played. Sarah began to cry in the 3rd row almost as soon as the first phrase of the nocturne settled into the room. Quietly, without movement, without bringing her hand to her face, tears that ran down without permission. Beside her, Dante reached over and laid his palm flat across the back of her hand on the armrest, and did not move it for the entire piece. The applause when she finished was the kind of applause that shifts a room. Backstage, in a small dressing room off the music wing, Lily needed to change into the simpler dress she would wear for the reception in the front hall. The teacher who supervised the children backstage had stepped away to manage the next performer. Sarah took Lily's hand. I will go with her, she said to Dante. It is 2 doors down. Dante looked at Marco. Marco gestured to one of the 4 men, a young soldier named Anthony Pereira. Stay on the door. No one in or out except them. Yes, sir. They stepped into the corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. The music wing branched off the main backstage hall, and at the far end of it stood the stage door, propped slightly open against the warm spring night. Patrick, the school security guard, stood at the corner where the corridors met. He nodded politely as they passed. He had nodded politely at Lily every morning for 4 months. Sarah and Lily and Pereira reached the dressing room. Pereira positioned himself in the corridor outside. Sarah closed the door. Behind them, Patrick moved. Pereira did not have time to turn fully. The needle went into the side of his neck before his hand reached his weapon, and his body slid down the wall in a controlled drop a man Patrick's size knew exactly how to manage. The stage door at the end of the hall pushed wider. 3 men in dark coats came through it on quiet shoes. Sarah heard the dressing room door open behind her and turned, and her eyes had time to find the first man's face, and she had time to draw breath to scream. And then a gloved hand came across her mouth, and a forearm came around Lily's small waist, and they were lifted. Sarah fought. She fought hard, but her body was not what it had been 3 months ago, and the man holding her was not a man who could be fought. Lily did not cry out. She had heard the soft, sliding sound Pereira's body had made against the wall. She understood, in the way only a child raised by a man like Dante Marconi understood, that crying out at this exact second would make things worse for her mother. They were carried, all 4 of them moving fast, down the music corridor and out the propped stage door into the alley behind the building. A black panel van waited with its sliding door open. Sarah and Lily were inside it within 20 seconds of the dressing room door first opening. The van was rolling before the door had finished sliding shut. Inside the auditorium, Dante stood in the back, accepting a handshake from a board member he did not particularly like, and his eyes moved naturally toward the side door he expected Sarah and Lily to come back through any minute. It had been 6 minutes. His phone vibrated against his chest. Marco's voice, very tight. "Boss, Pereira is down. Music wing. Dressing room is empty." The handshake fell away from Dante's hand mid-motion. He did not run. He moved through the crowd at the speed of a man who knew that running drew witnesses. He was through the side door and into the corridor in 20 seconds. Pereira lay against the wall, breathing but unconscious. The corridor was empty. The stage door at the far end was still open. The alley outside was empty. Marco was at his elbow with the GPS tracker on the tablet within 40 seconds. The tiny dot they had embedded in the seam of Lily's dress that morning was already moving. It was moving south, toward Brooklyn. Dante stood very still in the alley behind the music wing of St. Augustine's Academy, and for the first time in 9 years, since the last hour of Elena's life, he felt a thing inside his chest that he had genuinely thought he was no longer capable of feeling. He felt afraid. It lasted 4 seconds. Then he turned to Marco, and his voice came out flat and without mercy. "Call every man we have. All of them. I do not care about evidence. I do not care about courts. I want my daughter and her mother alive. Anyone who stands in the road tonight does not see morning." In the back of a black panel van crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, Sarah sat against the metal wall with Lily pulled fully into her lap and her arms wrapped tight around her. A piece of dark fabric had been tied across Lily's eyes. Sarah's mouth was free, now. She bent her head down close to her daughter's ear. "Mama is here, baby. Mama is here. Mama is here." Lily did not cry. She was, the entire ride, exactly as cold and quiet and steady as Dante Marconi had taught her to be. The van rolled into the Bianchi warehouse 46 minutes after it had left the alley behind St. Augustine's. The big sliding door at the side of the building rose just enough for the van to pass through and dropped again behind it. Sarah and Lily were brought out under the single hooded lamp at the center of the floor. The air smelled of diesel, of old metal, of the river. 2 long rows of empty steel shelving ran into the dark on either side. 6 men stood along the walls. Sal Bianchi waited at the steel desk Vivienne had stood across from 2 weeks earlier. He did not get up. Vivienne was beside him. She was wearing a black coat and a deep red lipstick she had taken pains to apply correctly. And the moment she saw Lily walking on her own 2 feet across the warehouse floor, the perfect smile she had been holding at the corners of her mouth for an hour finally arranged itself fully. "Hello, Lily. Do you remember me?" Lily did not answer. She lifted her face and looked at Vivienne with a steady, level, unflinching contempt that did not belong to a 6-year-old child. It belonged to the man who had raised her. Sarah stepped between her daughter and the desk, and the man holding her arm let her, because it amused Sal to watch. "Do not touch her." Sal Bianchi finally rose. "Sarah Bennett." He came around the desk slowly. "You have been very hard to find. You have what you want now. Let her go. Send her back. I will stay." "Oh, you are going to stay, sweetheart. We are not negotiating that part." He stopped in front of her. The scar on his cheek caught the lamp. "You are the woman who saw what happened to Tommy Calabrese. You are the reason that file has sat open on a desk in this city for 6 years. Tommy was my sister's son. This was supposed to end 6 years ago. Then end it. Just me. Send her home. I'm going to end it." Sal smiled. "But first, I am going to bring Dante Marconi to this floor on his knees. I am going to make that man ask me for something. Then we will see what the night looks like." He turned and nodded to one of his men, who lifted a phone and tapped a screen. A message was sent. "Warehouse 14, Red Hook. Come alone. They are alive. 40 minutes north, in a black Escalade running south on the BQE without its headlights." Dante Marconi read the message on Marco's tablet without expression. "He thinks I will walk in alone." "You will," Marco said, "through the front door, with nothing but a sidearm and your hands open. That is how he will see it. He will not see the 20 men I already have in the warehouses on either side of his. He will not see the snipers I put on the rooftops at Coffee Street 90 minutes ago. He will not see Pereira's brothers in the boats off the pier." Dante looked at him. 20 men in position already. I started moving them the second the dot crossed the bridge. I had every Bianchi-owned warehouse on this peninsula mapped 2 months ago, boss. We were going to get to this night eventually. He just gave us the address." Dante allowed himself, very briefly, to close his eyes. Inside the warehouse, Lily had not moved from her mother's side. She tugged once, very quietly, on the sleeve of Sarah's blue dress. "Mama," she whispered. "Bunny." Sarah went still. The white rabbit was tucked under Lily's arm. It had been with her on the stage. It had been with her in the van. No one had taken it from her, because no one had thought a stuffed toy was anything to take. Inside, one of its long ears, sewn between the seam and the stitching, was a tracker the size of a coin. Marco had placed it there the night Sarah had nearly bled out on the floor of the guest bath. He had decided then that nothing belonging to either of them would leave the estate without him knowing where it was. Sarah's eyes flicked, almost imperceptibly, toward Lily's. She squeezed her hand once, slowly. The two of them understood each other completely. Vivienne had begun to walk toward them. She stopped 2 feet from Lily and tilted her head. "You know," she said softly, "I could have been a good mother to you, if you had ever once let me be." Lily looked up at her. "You are not a mother," she said clearly. "You are a person no one was ever able to love." The slap came up in a cross, fast. Sarah was faster. She threw herself in front of her daughter without thinking. The flat of Vivienne's hand caught her across the cheekbone with the full weight of the swing, and Sarah's already weakened body folded sideways onto the concrete. "Mama!" Lily cried, and dropped to her knees beside her on the floor. And for the first time all night, the steadiness Dante had taught her cracked open and a single child's sob broke out of her chest. Vivienne stood over them with her hand still raised. The lights of the warehouse went out. Every overhead lamp, every wall sconce, every red exit sign at the doors. The whole building dropped at once into total black, the way a stage drops to black between scenes. For 1 full second, the warehouse was silent. Then, from every direction at once, the doors came in. The first sound after the lights cut was the side door coming off its hinges. The second was a single suppressed shot near the steel desk, followed almost at once by 3 more from opposite walls. Bianchi's 6 men along the perimeter had not moved into firing positions. Marco's men had been outside for an hour, and they had marked every one of those positions through thermal scope before the breach. 3 of the 6 were down before any of them had fully turned. Sarah dragged Lily to the floor and pulled her under the lip of the steel desk. She covered the small body with her own. "Eyes closed, baby. Hands over your ears. Stay with Mama. Mama, stay with me." Dante came in through the rear loading bay personally. He moved through the dark warehouse the way he moved through everything in his life, without hurry, without wasted motion. The sidearm in his right hand low and ready. The night vision rig over his eyes turned the space into a green map of moving shapes. He saw Sal Bianchi 20 yards ahead of him, braking for the front roll-up door at a run. He cut him off at the corner of the front aisle. Sal came up short. For a moment, in the dark, the 2 men looked at each other through the shape only one of them could see. "Marconi," Sal said. "Salvatore, you can kill me. You know that does not finish it. The Bianchi family will never forgive what happens in this room." Dante took 1 step closer. The barrel did not waver. "You laid a hand on my daughter. You laid a hand on her mother. There is no Bianchi family after tonight." He fired once. The shot took Sal Bianchi through the upper thigh. Sal dropped onto the concrete with a low, surprised grunt, his hand clamping down over the wound. He was not going to die from it. Dante had not meant for him to die from it. Dying was easier than the courtroom Dante had already arranged for him to walk into. Dante kicked the man's gun across the floor and kept moving. In the dark beneath the steel desk, Sarah felt rather than saw the figure approaching her. It was Vivienne. She had come around the desk along the far side, low and quiet, and in her hand was a kitchen knife she had taken off a workbench 3 feet from where she had been standing when the lights went out. The blade caught the faint emergency glow that had begun to bleed in from the open loading bay. "If I do not have Dante," she whispered, her voice splintering. "No one has him." She lunged. Sarah had time to half rise. Lily, lying on the concrete beneath her, did not. What Lily did instead was put her small foot squarely against Vivienne's left ankle as the woman drove forward. Vivienne's leg caught. Her body, already off balance from the lunge, twisted and went down hard onto her shoulder. The knife flew out of her hand and skittered 6 feet across the floor and stopped against a pallet. Marco was on her in 2 strides. He drove a knee between her shoulder blades and pinned her to the concrete with a single hand on the back of her neck. "Stay down." She did. Dante reached the steel desk 30 seconds later. There was blood on the side of his face that was not his. He went down on 1 knee and held his hand out into the dark beneath the desk. Sarah crawled out and into him. Lily came after her, and Dante caught both of them, pulled them flush against his chest, 1 arm around each. "You are safe," he said, low against the crown of his daughter's head. "You are safe. It is over. Behind them, as Marco and one of his men lifted Vivian up off the concrete, she began to scream. Not words at first, just sound. Then the words came, and they were ugly, and they were aimed at Dante and at Sarah, and at the small figure half hidden against Sarah's neck. She screamed all the way to the door of the side bay and out into the blue and red flashing lights that had begun to sweep across the warehouse exterior. The NYPD had been called by Dante himself, 12 minutes earlier, from the back of the Escalade. It had been arranged the way the Marconi family arranged things. The arrest of Salvatore Bianchi for kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder would be entirely legal. So would the arrest of Vivian Cross as his accomplice. Patrick the school guard had been picked up at his apartment in Bay Ridge 20 minutes before the warehouse breach, by 2 detectives who had been on Dante's quiet retainer for almost a decade. It was the cleanest war Dante had ever fought, because for the first time in his life he had fought one inside the lines. In the back of the Escalade, on the long drive north, Lily fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder before they had cleared the bridge. The white rabbit was still tucked under her arm. Sarah held her daughter the way she had not been allowed to hold her in 5 years. Across the seat, Dante reached over and laid his hand over hers. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, very softly, Sarah said, "Thank you." Dante looked out at the river sliding past the window. The reflected light from the bridge moved across his face. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You are part of this family now." 6 months later, the autumn came hard and bright to Greenwich. The maples along the front drive of the Marconi estate burned red and gold. The roses had been cut back for the season. The orchard beyond the tool shed had given up its last apples, and the air in the mornings carried that clean, cold smell that belongs only to the end of October in the Northeast. Sarah Bennett was still alive. More than that, she was, in the careful language of Dr. Salazar and the team at Sloan Kettering, responding beyond expectation to the trial protocol. The numbers no one had wanted to put on a chart 6 months earlier had begun to bend in a direction the physicians had stopped pretending they had predicted. 2 more years, Salazar had said in September, possibly more. He had stopped offering ceilings. On a Tuesday morning in late October, breakfast was served in the small, east-facing dining room because Lily preferred the light there. Dante sat at the head of the table with a folded newspaper beside his cup and reading glasses he had recently begun to need but rarely admitted to. Sarah sat to his left in a soft cream sweater, cutting a pancake into smaller pieces and lifting one on a fork to Lily's mouth, with the easy patience of a woman who had been doing it every morning for half a year. Rosa moved between the sideboard and the table with a coffee pot, and her old face wore the small, permanent smile it had worn since spring. Above the sideboard, in a simple silver frame, hung a photograph that had been taken in the garden in June. Sarah sat on a stone bench in a pale blue dress between Dante and Lily. Dante's hand rested on the back of the bench just behind Sarah's shoulder. Lily was laughing at something none of them remembered. Sarah was not Dante's wife. She still slept in the guest suite at the far end of the West Wing. The two of them had never spoken openly about what they were to each other. Some understandings did not require speaking. They both knew that Elena Marconi was still in the deepest chamber of his heart. They both knew that Sarah's borrowed years were borrowed. What they had built in the rooms between those two truths was something quieter than romance and stronger than friendship. And it belonged to Lily as much as it belonged to either of them. That afternoon, Lily came home from school with a folded sheet of construction paper in her bag. She had painted a family in art class. 3 figures stood together on green grass in front of a tall house with a red roof. A man in dark clothes, a woman in a blue dress, a small girl with 2 braids holding both their hands. And above them, drawn in soft white and gold above a gentle blue cloud, a 4th figure, a woman with long dark hair and a smile, looking down. "That is Mommy Elena," Lily said when she showed it to Dante in the study. "She is my guardian angel. She watches us from the cloud." Dante did not answer for a long moment. He set the painting down on his desk very carefully, as though it were glass. That evening, the 3 of them sat in the garden as the sun went low. Lily sat on the long iron bench between them, one hand inside Dante's, the other inside Sarah's. "Sweetheart," Sarah said softly, "are you happy?" Lily considered the question seriously, the way she always did. "I have 2 mamas," she said. "Mommy Elena up in heaven, and Mama down here. And I have Daddy. I am the luckiest kid in the whole world." Sarah looked down at her plate of apples. Dante looked out across the lawn toward the line of red maples. Neither of them spoke, because neither of them could. Inside the house, Marco came across the back terrace with a folder under his arm. He waited until Dante glanced up, and then said, simply, "Sal Bianchi got life. Vivian got 25 years. Dante nodded. He did not feel anything in particular about it. The past had closed. He turned back to the garden, where Sarah had stood up and begun to chase Lily slowly across the grass. And Lily was shrieking with laughter and running in zigzags, and the late autumn sun was on all of them. He left the folder on the bench and walked out across the lawn to join them. The three of them ran until they were all out of breath, and the sound of their laughter carried across the gardens and up into the windows of the great stone house, where Rosa stood watching with her dish towel pressed against her face. There are families that are made by blood, and there are families that are made by choice. Sometimes, the strongest family of all is the one that is made by both, mended together by sorrow, and held together by a love big enough to keep all of it from breaking apart. Dear viewers, thank you so much for staying with Lily, Sarah, and Dante all the way to the end. This story is, at its heart, about how love finds its way through the most impossible doors. It reminds us that the people who raise us are not always the people who give us life, and that sometimes the bravest act of love is to place what we cherish into hands stronger than our own. It reminds us that children see the truth long before adults are ready to admit it, and that listening to a child's quiet fear can save a life. It reminds us that no fortress, no power, no name in the world matters as much as a kitchen at sunrise, a small hand inside yours, and the laughter of the people you fought to keep. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that love can rebuild what life has broken, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the emotional stories we bring you every single day. We would truly love to hear from you. Did Lily's quiet courage remind you of a child in your own life? Have you ever had to make a choice as painful as Sarah's? Or open your heart again like Dante? Please tell us in the comments below. Share your story. Share your thoughts. We read every single one, and your words mean the world to us. To everyone watching tonight, wherever you are in the world, we wish you good health, peaceful days, and a home full of the kind of laughter that carries across the garden. Thank you for spending this time with us. Goodbye for now, and we will see you again in the next video.